Drawing his spirit sword, Jiwan inquired if there was a blacksmith capable of handling a sword like his, but the person wasn't sure, while the one under the bridge smiled knowingly. After some time, Mino regained consciousness and was surprised, asking when they had entered the village. Without facing her, Jiwan remarked that she was finally coming to her senses and suggested she could go on her own, which surprised her. As he began to walk away, Mino started running after him, apologizing for her attempt to leave him at the fortress entrance and asking if he was upset. In response, Jiwan reassured her, saying that she had already guided him to the castle, which was enough, and that she wouldn't be a hindrance from that point onward. Jiwan had turned to the woman and informed her that they were different. He had insisted that she should find her own way. After hesitating for a moment, she clenched her teeth and chased after him. She had claimed that he didn't know the place, but he had said he could ask for directions. She had wanted him to ask her, revealing that she knew the area well. Jiwan had turned to her and had said he was going to find a nightmare, which had confused her. When he had seemed unsure of where to look, Mino had offered to guide him. While they were talking, he had reached into his backpack and had mentioned that some people had business with him. He had faced the people blocking their path. The person who had seen him on the bridge had grinned cruelly. His companions had asked if they were the ones with the valuable sword. Mino had warned them to leave if they didn't want trouble, and they had complained that she talked too much. One of the thugs had gotten angry, while the others had said their brother had a short temper. They had threatened to take the spirit sword forcefully, but Jiwan had calmly refused to hand it over. The thugs had been surprised by his composure and had urged him to surrender the sword for his own safety. One of them had charged at Mino, but Jiwan had intervened. He had cut the attacker's arms and had sent him crashing into a wall, stunning the others. As the burly man had lain on the ground, Jiwan approached the remaining thugs, noting how annoying they were. He had drawn his sword and had challenged them to fight. Enraged, they had rushed him, emphasizing their bond as brothers. Jiwan had clashed blades with them. After a while, Jiwan held his transparent blooded spirit sword. Impressed, Mino had asked how he had defeated them with a single thrust. Jiwan had explained it was the only technique he knew, surprising her. She had mentioned someone she knew who used a single technique but as a slash, not a thrust. Remembering he had missed an earlier attack, Mino had asked if he had miscalculated his strength. Jiwan had revealed that during the fight with the thugs, he had sensed someone using a stealth technique on the roof, which had bothered him. So, he decided to scare them by causing a small explosion. This revelation had shocked Mino, who had questioned why he had used roof explosions as a scare tactic and had even suggested he give his technique a name, an idea he hadn't liked. Afterward, they started to walk towards the market and soon reached a place called Twilight Dusk. Mino had told Jiwan that it was a smith founded by a nightmare, and it was also the biggest smith in Gorgon. Just then, someone approached them and asked if they had come to make a request. The person was Jiwan, the craftsman of Twilight Dusk, who had told them that it would take a while to fulfill their request if they put it in that day. Hearing that, Mino had asked why the reservations were full, and he had replied that the workshop manager was absent at the moment, and there was only the assistant manager in the shop who was also busy. He stated that if they were looking for something, it might be better for them to buy a ready-made product rather than ordering something new. In the shop, there was a person who pointed at a sword on a table. They said it was made from a four-horned beast's horn, with one final step left to complete it. The people in the shop, likely students of the person talking, asked if they could try to finish it. This person turned out to be Michael Garnard, the assistant manager of the workshop. He asked if they could even make a hole in such a tough sword. Michael held the sword and said that if anyone could make a hole in it, they'd be the assistant manager of Twilight Dusk for a day. All the students tried, but the sword was too tough to pierce. Michael told them their efforts were weak and they couldn't even dent the sword. Jiwan, watching from afar, wondered when he'd get to touch a four-horned beast's horn. He noticed Jiwan had entered the workshop and tried to stop him, but Jiwan didn't listen. When Jiwan spoke up, Michael turned to face him. Jiwan said he wanted to give it a try, making Michael think he was a traveling craftsman. Michael bragged about his skills and warned Jiwan it wouldn't be easy. However, Jiwan surprised everyone by easily poking a hole in the sword with his finger. He swung the sword and declared he'd be the assistant manager for a day. But suddenly, the sword started to crack and broke into pieces, leaving everyone shocked and angry. Michael was furious, saying Jiwan had destroyed an expensive horn. Jiwan said he had been gentle and apologized. Michael, still angry, asked how they would explain this to the Primordial Universe faction who had ordered the sword. Jiwan promised to get them a better horn, surprising Michael with a horn from a 5-horned beast. Jiwan then asked if he could use their workshop, and Michael agreed. Meanwhile, Mino left, saying she had somewhere to go. Once she had departed, the workshop was closed, and Michael escorted Jiwan inside. He let Jiwan know that, as the temporary manager of the workshop for the day, he had full access to all its resources and personnel. Michael then asked Jiwan how he had come to possess the horn of a 5-horned beast, and Jiwan explained that he had acquired it by himself. Michael was taken aback and asked if Jiwan had single-handedly hunted down a 5-horned beast, to which Jiwan confirmed. This left Michael astonished, as he thought that such powerful individuals were exceedingly rare in the world of chaos. Jiwan, changing the subject, requested Michael's help in crafting a scabbard. Michael was surprised, wondering if Jiwan intended to use the horn for this purpose. In response, Jiwan presented a spirit sword and asked for Michael's opinion on its quality. Michael inspected the sword and noted that it resembled an ice dragon sword, though it lacked aesthetic appeal. Nevertheless, he believed that the horn was too valuable to be used on such a weapon and suggested crafting a new sword from it. However, as Michael examined the sword, he sensed a spiritual energy emanating from it and realized it was a spirit weapon housing the soul of an elite being. This puzzled him, and he contemplated that the sword was undergoing a remarkable transformation. He knew that when this transformation was complete, the sword would require a new name since it would have outgrown its original one. Michael, however, hesitated to craft a new weapon since Jiwan had already damaged the horn. Much to Michael's astonishment, Jiwan revealed that he possessed another horn, which he promptly retrieved from his backpack. After inspecting the second horn, Michael realized that it also came from a 5-horned beast, implying it had 5 horns, an obvious conclusion. Turning back to Jiwan, Michael asked how he could be of assistance. Jiwan simply requested that Michael demonstrate his skills in refining materials. Excited by the prospect, Michael inquired whether Jiwan had a specific shape in mind, but Jiwan left the creative aspect to him. Michael eagerly accepted the challenge, looking forward to showcasing his craftsmanship. Meanwhile, in the Gorgon castle, the commander relaxed in his office, sipping tea. At the same time, his covert operative reported an incident involving the deaths of some thugs at the hands of an individual named Jiwan. The operative also mentioned that they had lost their primary target during the operation. In response, Castle Commander Yurin Cheever requested more details about how the thugs had been dispatched. However, the agent admitted uncertainty, as he had unexpectedly lost consciousness while on a rooftop. This raised concerns about potential capture. Given that the assailant had managed to elude detection using the stealth skills of a master-level 3rd-stage adapter, the commander deduced that the perpetrator must be at least a 5th-stage adapter, adding to the intrigue of the situation. As a result, he gave orders to his agent to increase the force and conduct a thorough search of every corner of the castle to find this individual. The agent promptly followed the instructions. After the agent left the room, the commander winced and let out a sigh. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and noticed his teacup shaking violently. He slammed his hand on the table, remembering his Castellan, and told him to hang on a bit longer. Meanwhile, in a bar, a group of people sat watching a show where the host played a video discussing the most debated topic of the time, the 99th floor solo clear. While watching, the people discussed different scenarios about what might have happened to the person involved. At that moment, one of them shared that the tower had been suspended and suggested that some demon might have been caught cheating, leading to the suspension. The group also talked about the rumor that the demon had run away and abandoned their cultivation duty. They expressed amazement at someone's ability to clear a first-generation tower all by themselves. As they chatted among themselves, the bar's door swung open and Mino entered. Everyone present was taken aback by her beauty, but she paid them no attention and went straight to the counter, taking a seat. At that point, someone approached her, intending to ask her something. However, she quickly turned around and rudely told him to leave. This left the person feeling embarrassed, and he quietly walked away. Sitting there, she became increasingly frustrated, which led her to order a significant number of drinks. After consuming several drinks, she lost control of her senses and began to vent her frustration about Jiwan in front of Claire, the pub owner, who herself started to feel exasperated. Taking into account Mino's irritation with Jiwan, Claire asked why she didn't simply distance herself from him. Mino explained that Jiwan had been a source of great frustration because of his tendency to destroy everything during his fights. She also mentioned that his fighting style showed a disregard for the established rules of their surroundings and a habit of making peculiar statements. Mino recalled an instance during one of his fights when she remarked on his lack of hesitation in using his strength, even though he didn't fully understand the nature of chaos. Jaewon's response had been a simple assertion that those who hesitated were not truly human. These comments, along with his declaration that he and Mino were fundamentally different, intensified her frustration and made her feel insignificant. She conveyed that while everyone in chaos had faced hardships, Jaewon somehow emerged and looked down upon her, claiming that she could never understand his motivations. As she continued to vent her frustration, Claire placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, commenting on her immaturity and advising her to avoid getting involved in such situations again. Claire had firmly told Mino not to go near Jaewon again, warning that it could lead to her own death. This left Mino confused, and she wondered about Claire's intentions. Just then, the doors of the pub swung open, and a dazzling stream of particles surrounded Mino. Out of nowhere, a parrot appeared and handed her a letter from Carlton, the chief of the northern checkpoint. This unexpected message made Mino uneasy as she started to read it. While she was preoccupied with the letter, a voice from behind asked if she was the infamous Witch of Massacre. This startled Mino, and she reached for her dagger. She confirmed her reputation but was then grabbed by the stranger, making her drop her weapon. The stranger, too busy to fight, revealed he needed Mino's help. Meanwhile, in a workshop, a massive five-horned beast appeared, terrifying Michael. Michael, overwhelmed with fear, wondered how he could possibly deal with such a creature. Suddenly, Jaewon appeared and pulled Michael away, reminding him of their ongoing smelting work. Despite the chaos caused by the rampaging monster nearby, Jaewon insisted that Michael honor his commitment. Moments ago, after many attempts to shape the horn, Michael grew exhausted and admitted his inability to refine it. Jaewon disagreed, suggesting the problem lay in perception, not skill. He briefly covered Michael's eyes and stressed the importance of seeing. Confused by this, Michael looked at the horn, which began melting and floating in the air, leaving him in shock. The melted horn transformed into a colossal five-horned beast, astonishing Michael. As the beast wreaked havoc, Michael couldn't believe if it was the real five-horned beast. He regretted his casual approach to refining it, realizing the seriousness of his actions. Feeling like he was in a dream, Michael tried to open a nearby door to wake up. Outside, he was horrified to find his students and workshop laborers turned into eerie skeletons. Trembling with fear and disbelief, they asked if he had already completed the refinement process. This situation pushed him into a trance-like state, leaving his students confused. During this confusion, a voice told Michael that he wasn't allowed to witness this unusual world. These events made him question the existence of such a strange place. Meanwhile, Jaewon was deeply focused on hunting a monster and crafting weapons from its horns. He pondered why he was in this unfamiliar world. Despite the difficulties, Jaewon remained determined. He continued his work, extracting body parts from the living monster and skillfully using his forging hammer. While doing so, he wondered why he had been chosen to come to this world. Outside the room, Michael slowly snapped out of his trance and let out a scream. After some time, Michael, looking at Jaewon who had broken the horn, commented that a regular human trying to gain power equal to a nightmare or surpass natural limits was ultimately futile. He noted that Jaewon seemed to have aged too much to handle the horn effectively and should have realized this earlier. Michael explained that Jaewon had originally come to the workshop to meet the manager, who was a nightmare. However, it had been a long time since the manager had left, leaving only Michael, a mere human. Jaewon, in response, dismissed the importance of his own race, saying that as long as Michael could craft a scabbard, everything was fine, and he encouraged Michael to persist. Despite Jaewon's encouragement, Michael insisted that he had already made numerous attempts. However, Jaewon argued that success could still be achieved even after trying 100 million times, which made Michael chuckle. Michael stated that although it might not seem like he was working hard, he had indeed put in a lot of effort. This reminded Jaewon of his friend Jae, who used to claim he was working diligently while watching Jaewon. Jae claimed to have mastered all the skills related to blacksmithing and had a 99% success rate in repairing any weapon from the tower. However, he had started feeling like he was running away from the 1% chance of failure rather than toward the 99% chance of success. Drawing on this memory, Jiwan turned to Michael and acknowledged the tremendous effort Michael had put in. He asked if Michael understood the principle behind the processing skill. Michael responded that the principle of the nightmare's processing skill was one of the original skills that had existed since the beginning. To explain, he likened it to asking how a human could explain the origin of the world. Upon hearing Michael's words, Jiwan realized that Michael had been using a skill without truly understanding its essence. After a brief silence, Michael suggested that the principle might involve infusing tools with spiritual power and meticulously refining the horn using that power. However, he questioned why other craftsmen couldn't grasp this simple principle. Jiwan explained that these craftsmen hadn't properly learned how to use the skill. Hearing this, Michael thought that if the principle behind this skill was so straightforward, his students should be able to at least imitate it or do something similar. Turning to Jiwan, Michael asked if he knew the principle behind processing. In response, Jiwan said he didn't know it at first, but had figured it out. He brought his finger near the horn, and with a touch, the horn began to melt on its own, leaving everyone astonished. He asked them to take a close look and describe what they saw. They observed particles breaking down and commented on how difficult it must be. Jiwan emphasized that their extraordinary efforts unintentionally limited their perspectives and solidified the constraints of the world. He wanted them to understand that if their hard work hadn't led to success, it wasn't their fault, but rather a sign of the world's limitations. Michael felt shocked when he learned something surprising. He remembered how the nightmare he used to work with had always discouraged him from learning these methods. The nightmare insisted that these skills were only for nightmares, not for humans. It kept saying that because of human limitations, Michael could only ever be an apprentice. But Michael didn't give in to those limitations. He believed that with hard work, he could overcome them. So, he asked Jiwan what he should do. He wondered if Jiwan wanted him to go against the whole world. Jiwan replied by saying that the world tricks people into thinking they can't achieve what they truly can. He told Michael that even though he was getting older, he still could fight. Then, Jiwan turned to the horn and told them to take a closer look, advising them not to rely on the system but to trust their own eyes. Michael did as he was told and saw Jiwan running toward the same beast again. This made Michael realize that Jiwan saw a world without skills or interfaces, an honest world with no deception. Michael couldn't help but wonder how someone could live like that unless they were insane. He raised his hammer and struck the horn with force. Sometime later, Jiwan emerged from the workshop, saying his work was done and he had to leave. Michael looked at the transformed sword and asked if Jiwan had chosen a name for it. Jiwan hadn't picked a name, so he let Michael choose one. Michael named the sword Maverick and said there couldn't be a better name for it. All the craftsmen said their goodbyes to Jiwan and wished him a safe journey. As he walked away, Michael called out and asked how he looked in the world Jiwan saw. Jiwan simply said the word human and left without looking back, leaving Michael to wonder if anyone else could truly understand that lonely world. As Jiwan walked away from the castle, Mino quietly followed him. Jiwan asked her why she was following him, and she asked if he thought her intentions were dark. Jiwan questioned her about her plans, and Mino admitted she intended to kill him. Jiwan asked her why, and she said she wanted a life of luxury and the soul stone he possessed, which seemed to amuse him. Noticing his lack of genuine emotion, Mino gave Jiwan some clothes, explaining that she didn't want to use his things for free and wanted to apologize. She then asked him if he couldn't meet the nightmare and what his plans were. Jiwan revealed that Michael had told him how to meet them, and he intended to follow that path and inquire about the tree of imagery to find his way to the depths. Mino asked about his purpose for going there and reaching the depths. She explained what happened to people who returned from the depths when Jiwan revealed that he had no intention of returning. She felt shocked by his intentions and grew frustrated. She asked, who gave him the right to do whatever he wants without considering what others think? She noticed that he always did things his way and called him cold and thoughtless. As she looked at the people on the streets, she couldn't understand why Jiwan didn't see them as fellow humans. She believed that they were all humans, but not as strong and courageous as him. Jiwan remembered how she was willing to sacrifice herself in the present and never return to the past. He also recalled Michael, who was determined to become like nightmares and worked hard for it. Using his ability to read her thoughts, Jiwan realized that she was tasked with luring him and threatening the safety of someone dear to her. He looked around and saw people hiding on the opposite sides of the street. He knew that to save the hostage, he had to risk his life, but he found it meaningless because no matter how many times he saved them, the truth remained unchanged. He believed that this world was controlled by the wealthy and those who had sold their souls for money. He thought it would be better to eliminate them and find the nightmare. Just then, Mino stepped forward and took the bag of clothes from him. She said that he didn't seem like a human to her and suggested they part ways. This left Jiwan confused, and she declared they would never meet again. As she walked away, Jiwan noticed that she did look like a human, while the people observing them sent a message that Mino had betrayed them, and the nightmare had gone to waste. Hearing about the nightmare, Jiwan wondered if it was with them. After a while, Mino returned to the pub and opened the door, calling out to her Aunt Claire. However, inside, she was met with a scene of destruction. The pub was in ruins, and a group of armed individuals had captured Claire. Claire told Mino that she might die this time because of her. Janaya, the person in front of her, asked why she was alone and what happened to their deal. Mino remarked that he was more naive than he looked and drew her daggers. She said that the person they wanted couldn't reach this place. She swiftly hurled her daggers at them, revealing that the person they were after had gone to eliminate another target. Janaya, undeterred, used his shadow occult skill to create powerful shadows to fight Mino. He recognized her ability to take on multiple opponents and anticipated witnessing her skill firsthand. However, before the shadows could attack, Mino executed a backflip and threw more daggers at them. In response, Janaya gripped his sword and unleashed a massive wave that knocked Mino to the ground. Approaching her, Janaya said that no one could figure out what was happening inside such a place. He gave her another chance to go and bring Jiwan to them. She responded by claiming that they would be pursued by the dark forest. When they accused her of bluffing and pointed out that there were no branches of the dark forest in the fortress of Gorgon, Janaya placed the sickle on Claire's neck. He declared that they wouldn't find out until she and her aunt were completely destroyed. Mino clenched her fists, got back on her feet, and launched a powerful dagger attack using her frozen fencing skill. However, with a single swing of his sword, Janaya shattered all of Mino's daggers into pieces. His malicious laughter filled the air as he expressed his intention to tear her apart personally. Realizing that she had no chance of winning against such a formidable opponent, she remembered Jiwan asking her if she would return to the past if given the chance. She smiled, wishing she could go back in time at that moment. Janaya raised his sword to kill her. But just as he brought the sword down towards her, a powerful blow struck him, surprising his comrades. Jiwan entered the pub, complaining about this kind of situation. Mino asked why he had come, expecting him to save her. However, to her disappointment, he explained that he had come because the clothes didn't fit him and handed her the packet back. Looking at Jiwan, Janaya and his people smiled, assuming he possessed a spirit weapon and had made it easier for them by coming himself. Jiwan asked if they were the ones having nightmares and told them to bring the nightmare to that place at that moment. Janaya and his group were surprised and thought Jiwan was as crazy as the rumors said. Mino called out to Jiwan, warning him that Janaya was a fourth stage adapter. Janaya and his group charged at Jiwan, saying they would teach him a lesson. In response, Jiwan took out his sword and unleashed a powerful energy wave, leaving them bewildered. When Janaya dodged the attack, Jiwan was surprised. Meanwhile, the members of the opposing group were equally astonished and wondered if Jiwan was one of the mighty of the abyss. Jiwan pondered how Janaya had dodged it, thinking that only the five-horned beast could evade his slight thrust. He wondered if a fourth-stage adapter was on par with that level of power but decided it didn't matter. Jiwan prepared to launch another attack. However, before he could do so, Janaya used Claire as a shield and threatened that if he attacked, she wouldn't be safe either. Claire encouraged Jiwan to attack without concern for her safety, which prompted Janaya to slap her and tell her to be quiet if she didn't want to get hurt. Witnessing this, Mino reassured Claire that they would save her and then turned to Jiwan, asking if he could do it. Jiwan, holding his sword, wondered why she was asking him that since he had come for the nightmare, not to rescue them. He believed he needed to eliminate anyone in his way, be it the enemy or the hostage. However, Mino stopped him, reminding him that she was a human. Jiwan recalled the bustling market and Mino herself, and he suddenly halted in his steps. Some folks in front of him taunted him, daring him to strike if he could. With his unique insight, Jiwan noticed they all looked like skeletons, except for Claire. She appeared completely human and urged Jiwan to attack. After a brief moment of contemplation, Jiwan raised his sword high and unleashed a mighty surge of energy, shattering the roof of the pub and touching the sky. Outside, Carlton, his guards, and onlookers were left bewildered, wondering about the strange occurrence. After observing the energy wave for a while, Carlton grasped the situation and ordered his guards to take action. This energy wave shattered the soundproof barrier above the pub, making Janaya and his people anxious. Shortly after, Carlton entered the pub and instructed his guards to encircle the place. He approached Jiwan, inquiring about the commotion. Jiwan remarked that Carlton had arrived at the perfect moment, asserting that the people they were fighting against were violating the laws Carlton cherished so dearly. Pointing towards Janaya, Jiwan admitted he didn't know all the details but claimed that this person had broken the Gorgon criminal law. He exposed Janaya's plan to use the bar as a base and collaborate with the nightmare to wreak havoc on the world. This prompted Mino to question whether Jiwan had similar intentions. In response, Carlton cited the Gorgon criminal law, stating that anyone involved in property destruction and the abduction of residents could be arrested without a warrant. Upon hearing Carlton's announcement, Janaya addressed his comrades, deciding it was time to retreat. In response, Carlton deployed his silver restraints and questioned whether it would be so easy for them to escape. He stated that he would bind them all with his chains and summoned a large axe, declaring that further resistance would be futile. At that moment, Janaya charged at Carlton with his sword, but Carlton managed to block it with his axe. Despite exerting tremendous force, Janaya couldn't break through the defense and continued his efforts until his own sword began to crack. Seeing this, he leaped into the air to launch an attack, but before he could do so, Carlton used his silver restraints to tie up Janaya's hand and pulled him down, causing him to crash to the ground. Lying there, utterly drained of energy, Janaya finally surrendered, and Carlton remarked that it was a wise choice, proceeding to bind both of Janaya's hands. Janaya then threw a ball towards Carlton, which left him bewildered. As the ball hit the ground, it started emitting poisonous fumes that quickly spread throughout the pub. Seeing the toxic fumes filling the pub, Janaya commented that they hadn't anticipated needing to use a black cloud in this place. Just then, one of his group members, dragging an unconscious comrade, revealed that he had inhaled the black cloud because he hadn't worn his mask properly. Suddenly, Janaya heard a voice chastising them for using the black cloud without the clan leader's permission. He turned to see Sealrang, the clan elder, who inquired about Mino's strength. Janaya explained that they hadn't used it because of Mino but because the silver restraint had been employed, which surprised Sealrang. Gazing at the ruined pub, Sealrang asked if Carlton was inside, and they confirmed it. He chuckled, suggesting that Carlton's condition might worsen due to inhaling the black cloud. Just then, he spotted Jiwan emerging from the pub, carrying Mino and appearing completely unharmed. He turned to Janaya, inquiring about his identity. As Jiwan gazed at Sealrang perched on a tree branch, he channeled his sword's energy toward the tree, causing it to crumble. This left them astonished, wondering how he had left the pub unscathed by the ominous black cloud. Suddenly, one of them observed that they'd never seen an emerald bug without antennas, and even if he were one, there was no way he could perform such a feat.